This is a real event. Fauci is out there warning that any protection provided by the vaccine could be transitory. It's just transitory, you know. I'm not sure if it's going to work. Well, he was pretty sure a couple of weeks ago. He said, yeah, it's going to get 75% effective, I'm sure. Oh, that means that, because, that what he was telling everybody was that if it's only 70 to 75% effective, that means that 100% of you have got to get it, because that's his idea of herd mentality, herd immunity. I've said herd mentality so long because that's what herd immunity is all about. Herd immunity was something that was posited well before we were vaccinating people. And it was just, how many people had gotten a disease, a particular disease, because this happens all the time. We're faced with different strains of different diseases. And what happens is that's where you get the bell curve. Farr's law. People who have other underlying health conditions will die because we're all going to die of something. And then the people who survive will get immunity. And then it stops. And that's when you have herd immunity. The problem is that with vaccines, you don't get herd immunity because you don't have lasting immunity. You have to have lasting immunity in order to have herd immunity. And so Fauci is out there saying, by the way, he had a press conference with the other eugenicist, the other transhumanist that he works for and with, Francis Collins, these guys who are focused on depopulation, these depopulation dictators, I should say. But yeah, they've been bragging about transhumanism. That's a big focus now. Besides bioweapons, besides bringing in viruses or bacteria from other places, weaponizing them, making them more deadly, making them more easily spread. And then when they're told this is unethical, you got to stop it, then they fund it, continue to fund it at American universities, fund it in China and so forth. Besides that, they're into transhumanism. So the two of them are saying, yeah, I can't say for certain whether this vaccine is going to offer lasting protection or it's going to require annual injections, more like the flu. Yeah, that's right. Well, it's not going to have any protection that lasts. You're going to have to get it annually. Therefore, you'll never have herd immunity. You will just be paying and paying and paying and suffering the consequences. All right, and these guys who have been pushing this from the beginning are now still pushing. They're pushing a second wave. And we have the fearful faithful, I guess you could say, in Knoxville, Tennessee. Even though churches have been exempted from wearing a mask in Sunday service in Tennessee, you have a countywide mandate in Knoxville. It doesn't include places of worship, but some churches, reports the WBIR in Knoxville, some churches are still opting in, including a church called the Transformation Church. For the congregation at Transformation, oh, it rhymes, wearing a mask is the new way to worship. Oh, is it? Worship who? Worship what? The title of this article is, Jesus would have worn a mask too. Oh, would he? Is that what Jesus would have done? You know what I think Jesus would have done? When they asked him about paying taxes, he said, look at your coin. Whose picture is that on the coin? Caesar. All right, give it to Caesar. It's his. Well, I think Jesus would look at this and say, who's telling you to wear a mask? Fauci. All right, give him the mask. Render under this to this Caesar, Fauci, what is due to him. Give him a mask. Give him your bandana. Give him your handkerchief. Give him your paper wrapper. Give him your Kleenex. Whatever he wants to put on his face, right? Let him wear it. But no, they said this is a new way to worship. And you just be careful about what you're worshiping, folks. And be careful about who has authority as well. Because, as I said yesterday, the big problem with churches is they don't really talk about authority. And yeah, we should pay attention to authority. But what is legitimate authority? I suggest that you give some of these pastors the excellent film Treasure Sierra Madre. It became a meme. Maybe they've seen it. Maybe they've seen the meme if they haven't seen the film. Humphrey Bogart, great cast. And you have these guys are searching, and they're miners searching for a treasure in the mountains, and these Mexican bandidos come up. And they go, what do you want? You know, they know what they're there for. They're there to kill them and steal the stuff. There you are, right there. And they said, what do you want? They says, we are federales. I don't see your badges. We don't need no stinking badges. And then the shooting starts. There's Bogart. Anyway, they went on to say that what let them see the light at Transformation Church to know that Jesus would have worn a mask was that their numbers have been down because people don't want to come. Now, I wonder, is he talking about attendance or is he talking about dollars? I wonder which one of those really gets his attention. There's a great article on Babylon Bee. State governor mandates that everybody wear snorkels in case they fall into a pool. Starting today, all citizens of my state will be required to wear a snorkel at all times, both indoors and outdoors. This will prevent thousands of tragic deaths resulting from people falling into their backyard pools. Science says that we must do this. When pressed as to why they were necessary indoor, the governor replied, hello, sinks, bathtubs, showers. There are water hazards everywhere inside the house. We can't be too careful because, science. That's about what we're hearing from these other people here, right? They have no science. They have no authority, quite frankly. Because when we look at this article caught my eye. The EPA has approved the use of Lysol as a surface disinfectant, proven to kill COVID-19, according to the EPA. Tests showed they were effective against COVID-19. Lysol. Who knew? I mean, this whole time, we could have stopped the global lockdown, just get the Lysol. Or, maybe if you've seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding, you just pull out the Windex. Shoot the Windex everywhere. Windex, Lysol, sunlight, time. And as a matter of fact, at the very beginning of this scamdemic, I pointed out that a German scientist went into a home where you had a whole family was sick. He did a lot of tests. He couldn't find any trace of the virus on any surfaces. They've been telling people, no, it's not transmitted by touch. And yet you got people who are scared to death. Scared to death. As a matter of fact, they're coming up with new ways to biometrically track you because they said a lot of people are afraid of the touch pads that would get their fingerprints and stuff because they're afraid to touch that. So they have to come up with non-touch ways to track people. Keep them 6 feet apart. We can do a biometric scan visually on that. So yeah, EPA says Lysol is great as a disinfectant. Probably Windex too. I'm sure Windex is going to be approved very soon. Meanwhile, we have Daniel Horowitz saying more evidence that the coronavirus cases are now weaker than the flu. As a matter of fact, their case has always been weak. And now it's been totally destroyed, the case for lockdown. And one of the things that's kind of interesting, he said, as he looked at some of the statistics that are coming out, again, you can take the statistics coming from the government, from the CDC with a grain of salt, whether you're talking about flu statistics in a usual year, or whether you're talking about the COVID-19 statistics especially, or whether you're talking about unemployment statistics, for example. They cook the books in every different direction. The government never tells the truth. Newsflash, you heard it here first. The government is always manipulating data. They do it in a plausible way in most cases. Sometimes they just outright lie to you, and they don't really care whether you realize it or not because they have the biggest megaphone, and they have all the mainstream media and social media mobs pushing their narrative. But occasionally they'll put something out. People look at the data, and they said, well, as of the week of April 25th, for example, according to the CDC, just 12% of the cases were Hispanic. But as of yesterday, 34% of the cases were Hispanic. So what's going on here? Is it being brought into this country, as some people have suggested, by illegal immigrants coming across the border? Well, whatever. There's an interesting way to look at this because he said while the Hispanics compose 34% of confirmed positive cases, they account for only 17% of the fatalities. For example, he says in North Carolina, where they compose 46% of all cases, they only account for 9% of the deaths. So what gives? Well, the only logical answer is this is merely an illusion of mass testing of meatpacking plants and farm labor camps, where they began testing every worker. You understand? If you test a lot of people and you've got a test that produces a lot of false positives, you're going to get a lot of people who test positive. Now, they've closed down the meatpacking plants and they created problems with meat distribution and so forth. Did we have a lot of deaths in those plants? I haven't seen any screaming headlines on CNN and the Drudge Report talking about that, so I imagine it didn't happen, because if it did, they'd be screaming it at the top of their headlines. It's kind of like what happened at CPAC. Remember that panic? Oh, look, we got somebody who tested positive for CPAC, and everybody runs to their quarantine, but nobody died. And so now what are the Democrats going to do? They're kind of in a quandary. Do they have a convention? Do they disobey Fauci? Do they give up all that free media attention? Do they go to Joe's basement? All right, the Atlanta mayor says that she has tested positive for COVID-19. Didn't even know she had it. I've had no symptoms, but I've tested positive. How about that? Oh, well, now look at this. You look at the headlines everywhere. She's going to die. Oh, that happened at CPAC as well, right? I hope she doesn't die. She's 50 years old. A very, very low probability that anything at all will happen to her. Very, very low probability. If you look at the case fatality rate based on age, virtually zero. She doesn't have any symptoms, but she had a positive test. A positive test. You know what her real risk of dying is from? Shootings, the violence in Atlanta. The governor in Georgia, Brian Kemp, declared a state of emergency because they had 31 people injured, 5 killed in Atlanta. They've deployed 1,000 National Guard troops. Kemp, a Republican, said peaceful protests were hijacked by criminals. No, they weren't. Governor, you're wrong about that. They worked together in tandem. I read you the document from the Antifa Black Lives Matter people, talking about how they would use the peaceful protesters up front as a beard. And then they would, when they would attack and embed themselves in with the peaceful protesters, they would do an attack and then fade back in, use them as a buffer, hoping that the police would attack the peaceful protesters who were there. But yeah, that's the real risk in Atlanta. We'll talk more about that coming up. But when we look at what is happening here in Texas, Ron Paul is pointing out that the Texas COVID surge is nothing but fake news. And the governor's decree, says Ron Paul, he cited a rise in COVID cases, a rise in test positives, and a rise in hospitalizations as justification to force everybody to cover their faces in public and to threaten us with $250 fines. I'm done with Abbott. You should be done with anybody who does this. I don't care what else they have done, good or bad. When you enact these kinds of unconstitutional, draconian measures without any justification, legally or scientifically, you should be done with people like this, especially when it is done in reaction to a Twitter mob. I'm finished with Abbott. You should be finished with any Republicans who do this. It doesn't matter what their office is or what they've done in the past. If they're going along with this globalist takedown of our country, that's it. That is the dividing line for these people. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about this country. They don't care about your liberties or the Bill of Rights that they swore to uphold. They don't care about any of this stuff. You should not hold to these people because they're Republicans. Ron Paul is a little bit more charitable than I am. Ron Paul says Abbott may have based his executive order on inaccurate information. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he's just stupid. Maybe he doesn't know the law, even though he's a lawyer, right? This was, and he talks about the report that we had about a week ago from Rob Dew and from Alex Jones. He doesn't reference that report, but it is the same information that came out by the Collin County Judge Chris Hill that we went into such detail over a week ago. And just to recap that, it was back in mid-May, they decided they would redefine what a COVID case was so that they could get a second wave. You know, as Fauci said, a surge. Got to have a surge. So this was the meeting that we had in the report. Rob Dew, Alex Jones showed you video clips from the meeting and analyzed that for you as well. May 18th, Collin County Commissioner's Court hearing. They said, while previously the termination of a COVID case was a confirmed case, now they suddenly changed the definition to probable cases. Probable. Well, what is probable? Well, it was pretty ridiculous. As the judge said in that video that you can see at InfoWarsStore.com, not InfoWars Store, but at InfoWars.com, if you have a subjective fever, you don't even have to measure the fever, right? You don't have to get a positive for COVID-19. You don't even have to get a positive for the fever. It's a subjective fever. Yeah, I kind of feel feverish. Okay, COVID-19, write that down here. And you have a headache. You got a subjective fever and you've got a headache. And you live in Collin County. You now meet the qualifications to be a probable COVID patient. It's remarkable how low the standard is, said the judge. As Ron Paul points out, you repeat that farce across Texas. Is there any wonder that there's a spike in cases? Also, Governor Abbott's claim that hospitals are being overrun by COVID patients was refuted by hospital directors in 4 major Houston hospitals. They held press conferences, but the media ignored that. And so he concludes by saying the basis for Abbott's unconstitutional executive order has been shown to be false. Will he admit his mistake? The second wave is driven by propaganda. That's exactly what we're seeing. And hopefully, something is going to be done about this. Let's play video clip number 2. This is a Texas state senator, Charles Perry. And we have some Republicans, hopefully, who are going to do something about this, saying we've got to have a session because you can't let Abbott rule us this way. We've got to get the legislature back in session because the legislature here in Texas only meets every other year. Let's play video clip number 2.
As coronavirus hospitalizations in Texas skyrocket to new records, some state leaders are warning Governor Greg Abbott to not overstep his authority while he tries to stop the surge.
Fox pushing
With
that
reopening
agenda
stalled and
from the
restrictions
CDC.
being put back into place, those lawmakers just voted to censure the governor over his recent executive orders.
State Senator Charles Perry joins us live with why he supports this resolution and is calling for a special legislative session. Good morning, sir.
Come on, Tom and Carly. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, all right. So what's going on here? A bunch of Republican lawmakers voted to censure the Republican governor. Why is this happening?
Well, actually, it's the local county party in Midland. So the Republican County Party can, at its determination, file for a censorship. So it's one segment or one part of the state's party decided to do the censure. You know, and I think it reflects a frustration level amongst grassroots, amongst the base, but more importantly, across the state and just general everyday people, regardless of party affiliation. That's why I called or have asked the governor for a special session. For those that don't know it, we meet 5 months every 2 years. The next scheduled date is January 21 every odd year. That's 6 months away. And with where coronavirus or COVID-19 has impacted the state, the decisions that will be made, need to be made, and have been made need to be reviewed by a legislative body and not just an executive office.
That's right. That's right. One person should not be dictating this to us, and especially not the one person in the White House, President Fauci or Caesar Fauci. Render under Fauci what is due to Fauci, which is nothing. Don't give that guy anything. You know, we look at this and see headlines like, Texas doctor warns patients might die for lack of beds. Because as I reported to you, I had people contact me on email talking about what was happening in Florida, for example, saying every person who comes in for anything is tested for COVID. And then if the tests, which are not very reliable, turn out to be positive, you get hospitalized right away for COVID-19. Now, if you need that bed because you've got a heart attack or, cancer, suddenly anything that's even an emergency, the hospital beds are filled up. So we got somebody here who tested positive. They may not even have any symptoms with COVID-19. Maybe they came in because they broke their arm. But now we got them locked up in the hospital for COVID-19. Why? Because the federal government incentivizes that. Oh, here, write them a check for $19,000. You better bet they're going to test everybody that comes to the door for COVID-19. Meanwhile, it's about to lose its epidemic status in the U.S., according to the CDC. Why? Because an epidemic isn't the number of people that you get positive tests on who have something, but the number of people who die. And that should tell you everything.